Hey there, I'm Kristin Hanes, publisher at thewaywardhome.com, and I spend half the year in my DIY Sprinter van and half on my sailboat in Mexico. And my goal is to help you live nomadically too. So today we're talking about camp hosting with podcast host and writer Kathy Belge. Kathy is a solo RVer who lives with her cat on the road. Kathy encourages women to live out their travel dreams by sharing stories, tips, and advice on solowomenrv.com. Kathy, thanks so much for joining us today. So glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to make this connection.
Totally. So first of all, tell us a little bit about why you started out RVing in the first place. What's your story?
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, I'm not full-time, so didn't want to give that impression. But you know what? RVing, I've been a lifelong traveler. When I was 20 years old, I walked across the United States, which is a whole different story. But I've always wanted to travel and experience things and see things. And RVing had been a dream of mine for years. And then I had camped for years. I love being outdoors. It's my sanctuary. It's where I go to find peace, and it's like my church. So wanted for years and years to do RVing. And I think maybe like a lot of people, I was in a relationship with somebody who wasn't that into it. And then when we broke up, then I was like, oh, I need somebody to go with or whatever. You get those thoughts in your head. And then I don't even know what it was, but one day it just kind of clicked for me. It's like, hey, you can do this on your own. You don't need a partner. And from there, I just started taking the steps to make it happen.
Very cool. And so how much time do you spend on the road as opposed to being at home?
It varies, but so I've been doing this for about 4 years now. This year, I just got back from, I think I was out 6 months. Last year, I came home earlier than I had planned because I had a dog who was getting too old to travel. So I ended up coming off the road early. And then I think the year before that, again, it was like 6 months. So I try to spend my goal is 6 to 8 months. This year I'm off a little early again because I broke my foot. So, I'm back home in my house recovering from a broken foot.
Oh, bummer. It took you out of it earlier than normal. That's a bummer. Always something unexpected, huh?
I mean,
Yeah.
especially when
So
you're traveling solo and I had to figure out how to get back in my RV. So it was a whole other story. We won't get into that right now.
yeah, so you travel alone with your cat. And what were some of the difficulties of when you started out alone? Were there any difficulties, or did you just kind of, once you made the decision, you just jumped right into it?
I mean, I think there were difficulties. I think you tend to forget them as you kind of get into this. But I think a lot of the things, like everyone, like not sure where to go, where to camp, even like how the different components of the RV work. I remember my very first time going to dump my black tank, and I was at a campground. And, I had watched all the videos online, how to dump. And then when I go to do it, I know the directions. First you pull the gray and or first you pull the black, then you pull the gray. And I could only find one lever down there. And I just was so confounded. I didn't know what was going on. Well, it turns out in my RV, the black and gray were combined. And I needed a fellow RVer to come over and help me figure that out. So I think that was one of my first lessons, was not just how to dump my tanks, but just the community that's out here. And I really came home from that first trip feeling like, oh my God, I am part of this new community now, this new subculture, adventurers, RVers, travelers, and we're out here and we support one another. So that was wonderful.
Oh, what a cool thing to find out when you're on the road for the first time. That's so neat. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about like why you started camp hosting, and how long have you been doing that?
Oh, yeah, that's a great story. So after I started RVing, I had my RV for about a year. I started making plans to quit my job and go on the road full time. or for an extended period of time. And so happens that the day I quit my job was March 13th, 2020, which, as you know, was the day everything shut down. So I had to pivot what my plans were, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And one day it just kind of came to me that I felt this was during the pandemic, so much was closed down. I felt like maybe I could stay closer to home. And one way to do that would be to be a camp host for Oregon. I come from Oregon. We live in a beautiful state. I know you spend some time in Oregon as well. And so I decided that I would look into becoming a campground host. So that was how it all started. And the truth is, I have a background in customer service. I travel solo, but I'm a very social person. I'm an extrovert. I like being around people. And so this felt like it would be a really great match for me and my skill set.
So, oh, cool. So your first campground hosting gig, how long did you stay at that particular campground?
So one of the things that I like about hosting as a volunteer and in Oregon is that the gigs are for 30 days. So they're for a month. So you get enough time to spend in one location to get to know it, but also you're not stuck somewhere for like a whole season. As a traveler, that really appeals to me because I get to dive into a community, get to know it a little bit, get to explore all around there from a home base. And that's one of the things I love about being a volunteer, as opposed to a paid camp host position where usually they want you to be somewhere for the whole season.
Right. That's what I was wondering. And a season is usually about 6 months, right?
I'm going to guess. I haven't done that yet, so I'm not sure. So I can speak strictly to being a volunteer.
Totally. Yeah, I think that that's something that hold people back is that they have to stay for so long. And it's neat that you have found something where you stay just 30 days. So if someone's interested in that, how do you find those types of opportunities, or how did you do that?
Yeah, I think I just started researching online. I think where everything starts. I started looking into, there was a county park that I had stayed at that I had really enjoyed, and I reached out to them. And then in the process of that, just started looking into Oregon state parks. And, it was quite a process. You have to go online. You have to do an application. They do a background check. There's certain criteria you have to have in order to even qualify. And I also think one of the things that happened for me is I kind of lucked out because I got into the process sort of late in the year. I didn't start looking into this, I don't think, until about April of 2020. Some camp hosts had pulled out because of the pandemic, and they weren't going to be able to make it up to the campgrounds in Oregon because people come from all over the country to host in Oregon. They love hosting here. It's not just people from Oregon who host. So if you're thinking of hosting, don't think that you have to be restricted to the state where you are domiciled. That doesn't have to happen. But some people had pulled out because they couldn't make it. And so I was able to not just get a site, but get one of the premier sites in all of, what I consider one of the premier hosting positions in all of Oregon, which is at Wallowa Lake State Park out near the town of Joseph, which is in eastern Oregon, and the Wallowa Mountains, which is just spectacular, beautiful, beautiful area. And it was wonderful. And so from there, I kind of got hooked. From that first position, I got hooked and started hosting. I try to start out every travel season with a month-long hosting gig so that I can just kind of get, in the groove of things. It's a great way to get a free month also of not paid, you're not paid, but a free site for a month.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. What were some of the perks, and does that include like your hookups and everything, or what's included with your volunteer hosting?
So it does depend on the actual campground. And most of the ones in Oregon do have full hookup sites for the hosts. Most of them, like some of them have laundry as well. And they don't provide propane, but they do provide water and electric and a site. And most of the sites have good cell phone service. A couple of the ones that don't, they might provide you with Wi-Fi, but that's not always guaranteed. So that's something someone should definitely look into before accepting a hosting gig, is what the cell signal is in that particular location.
Yeah, that's a really good tip, because you don't want to be somewhere for a month if you have to work online or be online. That'd be challenging, huh?
That was the hardest part for me. Actually, the first year that I was out at Wallowa Lake, there wasn't cell reception out there, at least not for my carrier. And since then, I've broadened my scope of internet connection. But that first year, that was definitely the most challenging part for me. I had to drive 6 miles to get cell phone service.
Oh my gosh. And did you have to go do that every day?
No, I wasn't at that point. I didn't have an online job or anything, so I didn't need to connect every day.
Oh, that's good. So yeah, so that park or some of your other parks too, what are some of the duties that are required of this type of campground host, a volunteer host?
Yeah, so it kind of, again, it varies on where you end up. And also what time of year. I discovered that because the first time I hosted out at Wallowa Lake was in June and July. And then the next time I was there was this year in May. And so in May out there, it was still covered in snow. And we had snow almost every day. So primarily what we were doing in May was clearing out the sites to get them ready to be ready for the campers when the snow cleared. But primarily, and I guess that's not necessarily my typical experience. My typical experience has been more, you're really a point of contact for the campers. That's your primary duty, is to welcome the campers, greet them. If they have questions, sell them firewood, just kind of be the face, I guess, of the state parks, because they really don't have enough staff. So they really rely on these volunteer hosts. But then the other thing you do is a lot of litter pickup. Every time somebody vacates a campsite, you would go in and just clean it out and get it ready for the next camper to come in. And then, did I say selling firewood? That's another thing that is part of the duty. So it's depending on where you are, it can be, they say you should put in 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I've found in my experience that usually it's less than that, because you can get your duties done. Oh, and I do want to add, especially in Oregon, there's no restroom cleaning. I know that's one thing that maybe a lot of people are concerned about, is am I going to have to clean bathrooms? So in this Oregon State Park system, no, that's something that the rangers do.
Yeah, that was definitely something I was going to ask you, because when I was reading the book Nomadland, which tons of people have read, and they were definitely cleaning bathrooms and doing more of the icky labor. So that's good to hear that you don't have to do that in Oregon.
Yeah, I think if you're doing a paid camp hosting, that would probably be expected, but not for the volunteers.
Oh, that's so cool. And do you also, I forget if you mentioned, do you have to also deal with checking people in and helping people with that, or is that more of a ranger that does that?
Yeah, actually, that was one of the frustrating things, is that we didn't have access to the registration system. So I know for me, there were times when people would show up, and especially for me, my heart would go out. It'd be like solo women showing up 8:00 at night, and we're full, and me not really having access to looking to see who didn't show up or that kind of stuff. So that was something that we don't necessarily, we have a list that they give us of who's checking in that day and who's checking out, but we don't have access to the actual online system to see, did somebody cancel or whatever. So that's more of the rangers.
I see. Oh, that's kind of a bummer to have to turn people away when maybe they could have found a spot that night, huh?
Well, yeah, and actually, that was one of the most frustrating parts for me, and especially during COVID, because things were so short staffed, and just I think COVID protocols, they weren't. Some of the parks were not taking walk-ins at all. You had to have a reservation. So even if there was an opening, sometimes we couldn't let someone take it. Now, I know that a lot of that has changed now. We're back to more normal with everything, but that was super hard for me to turn someone away when I knew there was probably an opening.
Yeah, that's challenging. So what were some of your favorite things about hosting so far?
A couple things. One is just meeting the other campers and greeting people as they come. The unexpected connections that just happen, chatting with people who are out camping. But I think the other thing and the big thing is making friends with and community with the other hosts. So normally you're not the only one at a campground. There's usually other hosts there, and depending on the size of the park, maybe multiple hosts. So for example, last summer when I was hosting out at Silver Falls State Park, there was just such a great community there. It's a huge park. There's a lot of hosts, and they have this little host community. And almost every night there would be a campfire, and you just go hang out and be social and really make connections with other people. And that's also a way that you find out, where are you going next, and talking about some of the other hosting, other opportunities to host in Oregon or even other places. And also just talking to how a lot of the people who host are full-timers. I'm not, but a lot of them are. And so just learning from full-timers how they plan their lives on the road and that kind of stuff. So yeah, those
Great.
are some of the things that I love the most.
Yeah, so it sounds like it could be a really neat opportunity for someone traveling solo who does want to find friendship and connection. Would you recommend that to people who are looking for that community?
100%, without a doubt. And especially, the other thing that I've appreciated is, and this is true for camping altogether, but especially when you're hosting with people, there have been times where I've been hosting with people who I would never have met in any other circumstances, people who are very, very different from me with very different political leanings and whatnot. And we find that place to connect and form friendship. And I think that is so lacking right now in our country, that is so divided politically. And I feel like this is one place where we can sort of bridge those gaps. And that's something that's very important to me. That's one of the reasons why I like to travel, is I want to get out there and meet people who are different from me. I don't want to just be in my little bubble of people who think like me. So that part I really enjoy as well.
Yeah, and you're bonding over something you love, camping and nature and hiking and the outdoors and meeting people. So that's really neat to bring people together in that way, I think.
Yeah. And then I guess another thing that I did love was just being in a place for a while and then being able to just go out and explore everything that was around there and learning about the different communities and learning about the different nature areas around where I'm hosting, because these state parks usually are in places where there is other, things to do and see, not just like within the park itself. And a lot of the parks themselves are amazing, but to then go out and explore, like especially out there in Eastern Oregon, where I just every day off, I was off exploring different places.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge benefit. There's so many beautiful places to see in the country and in Oregon. Did you ever have any weird experiences as a campground host?
Oh, sure. Of course. And that's why community is great. I do remember there was one point where we had this couple, and they were from Texas. I don't know if that's important or not. They were in a huge Class A RV, and they came up and they were very upset because there were ants in their campsite. And they demanded to be moved to another campsite because there were ants there. And so I just thought that was amusing. So some people are better suited for RV parks, I think, than state parks.
Totally. I know it's really hilarious because you expect you're going to see an insect when you're in nature camping.
Yeah. It reminds me of those national park T-shirts that they sell that was like, it was nice, but there was too many bugs, Yeah. So anyway, that was one experience that I definitely remember just being kind of weird.
Totally. But I'm guessing most of your experiences are pretty positive, right?
Yeah. You just have to have the right mindset. I think when people show up to a campground, you have to remember this is their vacation, and this might be the only vacation that they have for the summer. And so you want to make sure that what you can, if there's something you can do for them, that you do that if they end up in a site where, the water's not working, like let's get the water fixed so that they can enjoy their time or, whatever it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think about that a lot too when I'm in a campground. I don't go in campgrounds very often, but I think about it and I'm like, wow, a lot of these people these are their few days off, where I feel lucky that this is my 7th month of camping so far this year before we go to our sailboat. And I'm like, gosh, that's so lucky. I feel so thankful all the time, where you were saying that that's their vacation. It's a few days. So
Right.
It's something to be reminded of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if someone was going to do this, you said you did some research online, and so how do you recommend someone go about finding these in their particular area or a particular state?
Yeah, I would just go ahead and Google state park campground host, put the name of the state in, and see what the requirements are. I know there are groups out there, like for example, in Oregon, we also have a Facebook group for hosts. So now that I'm in the system, I'm on an email list where they send out alerts when there's openings. And also I'm in this Facebook group where people talk about the experiences they're having at the different parks and whatnot. So I don't know if those kinds of Facebook groups are open to people who are not currently hosting, but that might be a place to start, is to look for Facebook groups to get information. I ended up, before I started, it just happened a coincidence that somebody that I knew was also a campground host. And so I was able to get on the phone with her and talk with her a bit about it before I actually went and had my first experience, to know that this would be a good fit for me. I wasn't 100% sure before I started. And that's the other good thing about it, is if you do want to give something like this a shot, if it's only a month long, like if it's not the best fit for you, well, that's only a month of your life. It's not like you've made this 6 months commitment,
Yeah, that's so true. It's good to keep in mind.
Yeah, but as far as, finding out, just to do research and see what the requirements are, see if you meet the requirements. A lot of times there is some physical abilities that you need to have, but actually this friend of mine I was talking about, her partner is in a wheelchair and they host together. And as a matter of fact, they just won the award for, best campground hosts of 2021 or whatever. So just because you have a physical disability doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do this as well.
Very cool. That's a great thing you pointed out, because I was going to ask that before. So thanks for addressing that. So with your plans, what are you going to do next? Are you going to stay in Oregon? Are you going to seek out other states, or what's your plan?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I don't know right now. Like I said, I'm back in my home. I'm recovering from a broken foot. I was planning to head back out in January, but now it looks like my recovery is going to take a little longer than that. So I travel in a 23-year-old Class B RV, and I've had a lot of breakdowns and whatnot. So actually, I'm looking to get something newer before I head back out. So I'll probably be heading back out in the spring and maybe sooner, depending on how my healing and my purchasing process goes. But actually, I'm looking into a paid host position this year, considering doing actually a paid host position where I would be in one place for longer. Just kind of weighing my options right now, seeing, what I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. That's one of the things I like about this lifestyle is that you don't have to decide, like you can kind of wing it a little bit. So.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, when everybody asks what our plans are, that's always a hard question to answer. I'm like, here's a rough draft of my plans, but they can change in a heartbeat.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm looking into a position here in Oregon, or maybe, but then that's appealing in a lot of ways because it's a paid position, but then it also restricts me from traveling the way that I've wanted to travel. So we'll see.
Very cool.
One thing I will keep doing it. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, but I will keep doing my podcast and keep doing the blog regardless of where I end up.
Good. I wanted to ask you about that. Tell us about your podcast and your blog.
Okay. So I started my blog when I first started traveling, and I named my RV Squeaky. So I was calling this Adventure Travels with Squeaky and was just kind of blogging about my experiences. But at some point, and it may have been actually after hearing you speak, Kristin, at a summit, I decided to try to take this more seriously and try to turn it into more of a thing that could potentially earn me an income. So, but I started the podcast primarily because I'm a podcast listener. I love listening to podcasts. And when I was starting out on this journey, I listened to a lot of RV podcasts, and I didn't find any that were speaking specifically to my experience as a solo woman. There are, different considerations for people traveling solo, and especially for women traveling solo. And there are a lot of us out here. So I decided, I have a degree in journalism. I can do this. And I just jumped in and decided it doesn't have to be perfect. What's most important is the stories that we're telling. And so I started the Solo Woman RV podcast. And then I eventually changed the name of my blog to Solo Women RV also, because I just want to be a resource for other women who are out there who maybe want to jump into this journey, or maybe who are on this journey and feeling like they want community and want to connect with others like them. So that is a little bit about why I started both of those things.
That's awesome. So, of course, we'll put a link to both your podcast and your website down in the show notes so people can find you. It sounds like a great resource for not only just women, but for people traveling in RVs. And I think that's fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where you go next after your foothills.
Yeah, thank you.
And one more question I had to ask. What type of RV are you looking for next?
Oh, actually, I'm looking for a newer Class B. And right now, the one that is appealing to me is a Travato, the Winnebago
Those are
Travato.
cool.
The thing, everybody has the thing that they're looking for in their RV. And for me, it's very important that I have a dedicated workspace because I do write and produce the podcast on the road. And so a lot of Class Bs, you either have a bed or a workspace. And so this one, you could have both kind of at the same time. So that is one of the ones that I'm looking at, but haven't made a decision yet.
Cool. That's so exciting. Thanks for coming on and talking to us about camp hosting. Hopefully we'll inspire some people to get out there and give it a try. I love the idea of the free hosting. That's such a neat, the volunteer hosting. That sounds like a really neat way to do it. So thank you for sharing everything you know so far.
Thanks for having me on, Kristin. This has been wonderful.
All right. Have a good one.
All right.